We have one more writer tonight. This introduction, like its subject, has a lighter side and a darker side. The lighter side is that last time Laura Henrikson read, we had Q&A sessions after each reading. And I got the great idea that this past professor of poetry could give a little mini college-level poetry workshop during her Q&A. Apparently it was even more painful for her than it was for the audience, and she made me promise to tell you that that's not going to happen again tonight or ever. On the darker side, see how nervous I can make her. When I read or hear Laura Henrikson's poems, I often catch my breath. She touches the tender centers as unflinchingly as she tackles the tough, scaly stuff that accumulates and threatens to scab them over. Laura?
Thank you, Anne, for that introduction. And thank you also, and Kevin, for organizing another amazing Waterline Writers event. And thank you all for coming and being here tonight. It's such a privilege to share my work with you. And I appreciate you being here. My first poem is called In a Mississippi Minute. I'm assuming everybody can hear me. Okay. The stranger, a boy, runs up the dock wielding a stick. My son grabs my arm. I look away through a cloud of fish flies to a Confederate flag snapping atop a houseboat. Some things are beautiful, like the two long strands at the fish fly's tail when thousands hover above the bank. And some are not. The mucky piles of dead fish flies up to one's ankles, and the boy on the dock because of what he's done. At first, I don't understand, though he waves his stick inches from our face. I see mid-stick, tiny teeth and jaws, and a curious gray-green texture I take for bark. A mosquito bites my cheek. I slap myself, then see he's caught an ordinary river snake, caught it, then rammed the sharp end of his stick down its throat, then back, all the way through until he said the snake's guts flowed out of its own back end. The boy growls and howls, waving his stick in triumph. His freckles and red hair are charming, and his teeth round and sparse. He grabs my son's hand, who thus far has clung to me in terror, but who now, so readily, so stunningly without reservation, bends to the boy's regard. Arm in arm, they're off, loping through the muck of fish flies to lurk the foul and shady edge of the bank. Thank you. I'm reading one more poem. It's quite long. And it's called It's Safe to Fish. Some white-toothed Floridian said so, because, he said, our poles had rubber grips, and our soles, too, were rubber. We nodded. We stood knee-deep in jolty waves and fished, and ate apples until the lightning that had stunned the horizon all day struck my pole, charred my fingernails, and blew me a good 10 feet back. You know what they say, high voltage scrambles the brains, which I believe. For example, my brother Joe used to stick forks in sockets. He'd hold on till his eyes rolled, and now something's off with him. He feeds cats explosives and lights fires. I don't know. I was hit by lightning and lived to love the story, especially the part about my dad, who later stalked the beachfront bars with my mom's pepper spray, looking for the Floridian who'd assured his kids their safety. He never found him. Thank God for that, and for the other criminal acts my family began but never finished. But that's where it starts. One dastardly deed, they say, leads to another, and I believe it. Because we are unimpassioned, because spiders eat their lovers and do it again, because even God does it. Ask Noah or Job, ask Israel. Ask 3 children on a windy afternoon smashing tomatoes on rail ties. We listened as a distant train upset the trestles or the thistles or the air. Hard to say which, but it was the same sound as the lions in our nightmares, a guttural purr before the attack we'd been waiting for all our lives, and of which we were well prepared. Our little muscles tightened beneath the maples as helicopters plunged and spun down from their branches. My friend with the junkie mother thought it would be fun to lure a classmate onto the tracks, strip him, and tie him down. At the last moment, when the train's nose lay only feet away, we would let him loose. But that's not all. We wouldn't give his clothes back. And you know what they say, a man naked in the forest is worse off than a dog without his skin. But I was struck by lightning and liked it. And we never did tie the kids to the tracks. But later, we would OD, hit deer without stopping, curse our mothers, rape and thieve. Hard to say how it happens. I just got done stealing carrots when I entered the yard from the field. Mr. Monger stood cursing my mother by the socks and slips flapping on the line. His fists jacked up and down. My mother stepped back. Someone, he said, picked his tomatoes. Someone smeared dog shit on his shed and poured oil in his compost. You know, they say that in bullfighting countries, violent crime seldom occurs, the need for bloodletting vicariously met through the matador. Not like here, where my 6-year-old brother Joe hid behind the tool shed, his BB gun pointed at the trunk of Monger's head. And that's not all. Joe shot, and missed, and shot again. I do love this story. In Beijing last year, a boy pulped his mother's head with a meat cleaver because she wouldn't make him dumplings. But that's something else. And they don't bullfight in China, and Joe never was punished for the shooting. He likes to brag about this. How he became our little hero, and by 13, he had more artillery under his bed than our granddad kept in his pickup, which was a lot. And like our granddad says, it's hard to say why it feels so good to shoot a jug of tomato juice, but it does. Just as it might feel good to hit the woman hitting her child in the dairy aisle, feels good to cock the rifle, pull the fist back by the yogurt and shoot. Knuckles at an upward angle to her nose, a stout thwack. Blood and tomato juice, juice and blood, and we lower the gun to the dirt, and our fist throbs, and we are eternally dog-driven for blood. You know, they say that once a dog has blood on his chops, it's all he'll ever want, ever. Oh, rabbit across the highway, we are back on our haunches, springing forward into traffic to taste you. And then there's the girl whose hood we transcend, who can't help but stop, stunned, and watch us twitch on the asphalt. Who might write us into her diary saying, I saw the most gruesome, most peculiar sight. And it's really hard to say if we would have tied the kids to the tracks, though we did drop dead chipmunks onto passersby from up the schoolyard willow, its cordy branches rocking us in the autumn wind, to and fro as the palm leaves above me when I woke in the cold Florida sand. my fingertips pulsing, my mother shaking me back and forth like a wet sack of opportunity. I thought I was dead. And at that moment, I loved my mother more for her pain than I ever had for her virtue. Hard to say why. Strange how pain can define us, that pound of ground meat within that makes us pitied and despised. Don't know which or why, but I do have a friend whose husband hits her. A child could predict the rest. Penitence, daisies, sonnets dedicated to her big love. And she stays. That's the thing. She stays. And I hate her. And the rabbit chewing the clover in a ditch watches. And the girl pokes with a stick the raw patch on our jaw. And that's not all. She leans down and puts her fingertip to our pupil, which is dead, but wide open. Wide to the sky, punching down. Or the ground, wanting to absorb us. The joke, the dirty secret flying back to its mouth.